A king pinned down, screaming in the mud. A knife slowly carving the shape of an eagle into his bare back. His ribs are then brutally hacked away from his spine, one by one. Finally, his lungs are pulled out and draped over his shoulders like gory wings, while he's still alive to feel the agony. It sounds like a nightmare, but this is a real legend from Viking history. And the victim? A real king. This is the gruesome tale of King Ælla of Northumbria and the Viking ritual of the blood eagle, one of the most brutal execution methods ever recorded. How could such a horrifying fate be inflicted on a king? And why? In the next few minutes, we're diving deep into this dark chapter of history to find out. This story isn't just shock for shock's sake. It reveals the extreme limits of human cruelty and vengeance in the medieval world. By understanding what happened to King Ælla, you'll gain a chilling perspective on how far people once went for revenge, and perhaps appreciate that, thankfully, we live in a more civilized age. So, steel yourself. This tale will make your blood run cold, but you won't be able to look away. Our story begins with an infamous Viking hero, Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar was a legendary Viking king and raider, a man who terrorized kingdoms, until the day King Ælla of Northumbria captured him. As legend has it, Ælla sentenced Ragnar to die in a pit of poisonous snakes. Imagine the scene. Ragnar, a fearsome warrior who had sailed oceans and sacked cities, writhing in a dark pit as vipers sank fangs into him. His final act was to roar out a curse, or perhaps a prophecy. With his last breath, Ragnar allegedly warned that his sons would seek vengeance. In one saga, he even compares them to piglets, who would squeal in fury upon hearing how the old boar, their father, had been slaughtered. King Ælla might have dismissed these words in the moment. He shouldn't have, because Ragnar's sons were no ordinary men. They were Vikings, every bit as ruthless and bold as their famous father. Among them was Ivar the Boneless, a name that still sends shivers down the spine. Ivar, along with his brothers, like Ubba and Halfdan, would soon assemble a vast army, so large and fearsome that the Anglo-Saxon chronicles simply called it the Great Heathen Army. In 866 AD, this army of Vikings invaded Northumbria, thirsty for revenge. Their target was clear: King Ælla. The Northumbrians were caught off guard by the ferocity of the assault. Monasteries and towns went up in flames under the Vikings' wrath. Ælla scrambled to defend his kingdom. Even his rivals within Northumbria, including a former king whom Aella had previously deposed, united with him to face the common enemy. But nothing would stop Ragnar's sons. In March 867, the Vikings attacked York, Northumbria's capital. Ælla led his forces in a desperate battle to repel them. Just picture the chaos: swords clashing, shields splintering, war cries in Old Norse echoing off the city's wooden walls. The Northumbrians fought fiercely for their lives and their king. But the Vikings, driven by vengeance, were unstoppable. Amidst the slaughter, King Ælla was captured alive. Perhaps he would have preferred to die fighting on the field, because what came next was far, far worse than any ordinary death. As Ælla was bound and dragged before the vengeful sons of Ragnar, he must have known something truly terrifying was about to happen. This wasn't going to be a swift execution or a merciful beheading. No, Ivar the Boneless had something special planned for the man who killed his father. The air was cold and heavy with the smell of blood and smoke from the battle. The Viking warriors formed a circle, their faces grim and expectant. Some may have been chanting or drumming, preparing for a ritual of sheer cruelty that would double as a sacrifice to their gods. King Ælla, a lord of Northumbria just hours before, now found himself on his knees, at the mercy of men who knew none. They threw Ælla down, face down on the ground, and stretched out his arms and legs. One Viking pressed a knee between the king's shoulders to keep him still. If Ælla struggled, it did no good. Dozens of strong hands held him fast. Ivar the Boneless, driven by cold fury, stepped forward with a blade. And then the ritual cutting began. First, Ivar carved an outline of an eagle across Ælla's skin. A sharp knife point dug into the king's back, slicing open flesh in long, deliberate strokes. Blood flowed freely, turning Ælla's tunic dark red and making the soil muddy beneath him. Ælla screamed, a sound so raw and agonized that it echoed off the stone walls of York. But this was only the beginning. Next, with the eagle design cut into the skin, the true horror unfolded. Viking executioners grabbed their weapons, some accounts say it was done with swords or axes, and hacked into Ælla's back with brutal force. They chopped through the ribs where they met the spine. Crack. One rib separated. Crack. Another. They went methodically, one rib at a time, severing bone from backbone, tearing open the king's ribcage from the back. Ælla's screams would have been inhuman at this point, the pain indescribable. The onlookers, hardened warriors, watched without flinching. This was the vengeance they had promised, and they intended to see it through to the ghastly end. With the ribs detached from the spine, the executioners then pulled them outward, twisting them up and away from the back. One by one, Ælla's ribs were spread open, fanning out from his spine. Imagine the visual. The bones splayed out to either side, exposing the gaping cavern of his chest. This made a pair of ghastly wings on each side of his body, ribs and skin stretched out in the shape of an eagle's wings. In this moment, King Ælla's own body had been transformed into a cruel symbol, the blood eagle. Amazingly, it's said that Ælla was still alive through much of this ordeal. Shock and agony would have consumed his mind. Perhaps his vision blurred, and his ears rang with pain. But the Vikings weren't done. According to some accounts, they wanted to make absolutely sure Ælla experienced the full torment. How? They took salt, yes, ordinary salt, and sprinkled it into the gaping wounds of his back. Think about that for a moment. We still use the phrase, rubbing salt in the wound, to mean adding to someone's pain when they're already hurt. Here, the Vikings did it literally. The coarse salt crystals would have burned horrifically on the exposed flesh, sending fresh waves of agony through the dying king. It was sadistic torture, a final insult to the man who had killed their father. Ælla's body writhed involuntarily as the salt bit into raw muscle. If he wasn't already unconscious from pain, this unspeakable cruelty would have made him wish to lose consciousness quickly. Finally came the grisliest finale of the Blood Eagle ritual. Ivar and his men reached into Ælla's chest cavity from behind, and with a swift, savage motion, ripped out his lungs. Yes, his lungs, the organs that once drew breath and kept him alive. They pulled them out and draped them over his outspread ribs so that they hung on his back. To the onlookers, it would appear as if bloody wings were emerging from the body of the king, completing the image of a monstrous eagle. Some say that in those final moments, Ælla's lungs, now exposed to the cold air, fluttered. A grotesque imitation of a bird flapping its wings. It was the final sign of life leaving his body. Within moments, mercifully, King Ælla of Northumbria died, his last breaths literally in the hands of his killers. Silence fell over the scene, broken only by the wind and the ragged breath of the Viking warriors who had exerted themselves carrying out this atrocity. It was over. The legendary revenge was complete. In that gruesome tableau, the sons of Ragnar had avenged their father in the most horrifying way imaginable. One can only imagine the mixture of triumph and grim satisfaction on Ivar the Boneless's face as he gazed upon the mutilated corpse of his greatest enemy. For the Vikings, this wasn't just execution, it was ritual. Some later stories suggest they offered Ælla's body, or his soul, to Odin, the Norse god of war and death, by executing him in this manner. In their eyes, justice had been served according to the old Viking code: blood for blood, agony for agony. What happened in the aftermath of this savage execution? In the short term, the Vikings took control of York and much of Northumbria. With Ælla dead and another rival king killed in the same battle, Northumbria was leaderless. The Vikings installed a puppet ruler and moved on to continue their campaigns of conquest elsewhere in England. The sons of Ragnar didn't stop with Ælla. They would go on to wage war against other kingdoms, their father's death now avenged, but their ambitions still burning. The Great Heathen Army would terrorize England for years, and stories of their ferocity spread far and wide. But nothing would top the infamy of what they did to King Ælla. News of Ælla's fate, as you can imagine, must have struck terror into the hearts of other Anglo-Saxon kings. Just think, if this is what happened to one who crossed the Vikings, what mercy could anyone else expect? For centuries, the tale of the blood eagle on King Ælla was told and retold. Norse storytellers sang of it in sagas, ensuring that everyone knew the price of killing Ragnar Lothbrok. Even in English histories, Ælla's demise stood out as a warning of Viking wrath, though some Christian scribes preferred to write that he simply died in battle, perhaps unable or unwilling to describe the ghastly ritual that the pagan heathens performed. Was the blood eagle real, or was it exaggerated legend? That question lingers even today. Some historians believe the whole thing might have been a later invention or a misunderstanding, a bit of Viking propaganda to instill fear. After all, the story was written down decades or even centuries after 867, and it's possible the truth was stretched into gruesome myth. But whether or not every detail happened exactly as described, one thing is certain. People of that era believed it happened, and the legend of the blood eagle took on a life of its own. It stands as perhaps the most infamous example of Viking cruelty and ritualized revenge. The tortured death of Ælla of Northumbria is a tale as dark and dramatic as any fantasy, except it was real history. It reminds us just how violent the world could be over 1,000 years ago, and how vengeance can drive humans to terrifying extremes. It's a story that leaves us with a mix of horror and fascination. Horror at the pain one man endured and the brutality others were capable of. And fascination at the window it gives us into the mindset of a warrior culture, where honor and revenge were worth more than mercy or human life. In the end, King Ælla's name is remembered not for how he lived, but for how he died. His gruesome execution by the blood eagle became immortal in Viking lore. And now you know the full dark story. If you found this tale as chilling as we did, and you hung on till this end, take a moment to breathe. You might also be feeling very grateful not to have been a medieval king, right? Thank you for watching. If this story captivated you, please hit the like button. It really helps. Let us know your thoughts or reactions in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about this brutal Viking revenge. And don't forget to subscribe for more gripping and dramatic history stories. We have plenty more dark and fascinating tales from the past to share. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll delve into another unbelievable chapter of history. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.